Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. Getting there is half the fun. Aviation meets outdoor recreation. My name is Emily Sang. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Utah. I studied urban planning. I currently work as an intern for the Utah Department of Transportation in the Division of Planning. I've also had some previous experience with the Division of Aeronautics, working on economic development. So I am very excited for this discussion today. So we have some wonderful panelists here. I'll just go ahead and introduce them. We'll do an introduction, then a few individual presentations, then leading into a moderated panel, and then we'll have some time for a public discussion. So first I'll introduce Clint Harper. He is a retired Air Force veteran with 21 years of experience in the aviation industry. Clint works with UDOT's Division of Aeronautics to foster economic development opportunities and around Utah's airports. He sees airports as critical but often forgotten infrastructure, which will soon be an important enabler of connectivity in our economy. As technological advances will soon make aviation more accessible to a wider range of our population, Clint's unique background and experience is helping Utah's airports and communities prepare. He graduated from the University of Utah with a Master of City and Metropolitan Planning degree and a graduate certificate in urban design, and in his free time, he enjoys cooking, camping, and watching hockey with his wife and 4 daughters. We also have Heidi Goodhart. Heidi works as the active transportation manager with UDOT Planning. Heidi moved to Salt Lake in 2006 with her bicycle at her side, and in 2013, Heidi turned in her car keys and became a full-time bicycle commuter, which has opened her eyes to the benefits and challenges non-vehicle owners face. She aspires to help design and cultivate transportation options in Utah that support resilient urban environments that focus on safety, health, and activity. Heidi uses her passion for active transportation and interest in its social, economic, and environmental benefits in her work with UDOT's Move Utah and TravelWise programs. Heidi holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies and in Urban Planning, as well as a Master of City and Metropolitan Planning. Pitt Gree, a husband and father of 3, Pitt Gree is the newly appointed Director of the Office of Outdoor Recreation for the state of Utah. A Utah native, he has worked in the outdoor industry for almost 15 years, including leadership roles in marketing and sales for Baby.com, Goal Zero, and Petzl. He found rapid progression, kayak school, and worked many years as the lift operations supervisor and training coordinator at Utah's Canyon Resort. His passion for the outdoors is demonstrated by being an experienced backcountry skier, climber, and whitewater paddler, fly fisherman, and mountain biker. Next we have Stephanie Pack. Stephanie came to EDC Utah from Silicon Slopes, where she was working for Qualtrics. She joined the fast-growing tech unicorn after she earned degrees in political science and Spanish from Utah State University. She was originally on track to go into education, but a brief internship in rural Peru teaching business classes to locals instilled her a passion for business development and entrepreneurship. She has started a business and co-founded another, but chooses to focus on helping other businesses thrive. She's a florist, blogger, musician, artist, outdoor enthusiast, and hobbyist who's always looking for new opportunities to learn and grow. And lastly, we have Colby Cooley. Colby came to EDC after having worked at the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GOED, as lead fellow. He loves the opportunity that working at EDC Utah provides him to meet people from all over the world, to be involved in important decisions being made in Utah, and to learn from incredible resources within the organization and the community at large. Aside from his healthy love of bright socks and good beards, Colby is also an avid sports fan. He supports the University of Utah youth football team and Real Salt Lake soccer, and enjoys skiing, boating, and discovering great new spots to explore with his friends. So let's give all a warm virtual welcome to them, and thank you so much for being on this panel. So we'll start with the individual presentations, and Clint Harper from Aeronautics will just tell us a little bit more about his view on outdoor recreation and aviation.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate it, Emily. And I want to give thanks to Emily for everything that she's done and help pull this all together. This was a kind of a hectic leading up to all this, and without her help, I don't think we could have pulled this off. So also a warm virtual thank you and welcome to Emily for all that she's done for us. So Emily, can you show my screen? Or not show my screen, but show my presentation. All right, awesome. So what I wanted to talk about in this presentation was primarily centered around the Utah Aviation Development Strategy, which is a mix of plans that I'm the project manager of here in Utah to really define and forecast, how aviation is going to look in the future. And so the next few minutes, this is essentially what I'm going to be talking about with a quick detour just to talk about the system itself. So next slide. Yeah, the next slide there, Emily. I can't advance it.
This one?
No, the next one.
It's showing your, sorry, Emily, it's showing just the PowerPoint kind of editing page when you open PowerPoint instead of the presentation. I don't know if you might need to reshare.
Okay, let's try this again. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, we can go. So it's on the screen, but we can work with this. So go up to the second slide there on your window there. There we go. Okay. So generally, the Utah's airport system consists of 46 public use airports. A lot of people, would never guess that there's 46 airports within the state. And among those 46, there are 8 commercial service airports, which a lot of people are familiar with. Those are the airports that we regularly schedule passenger and commercial flights out of. And there are also 36 FAA obligated airports, which means that these airports receive funds for capital improvement from the Federal Aviation Administration. And there are 10 non-obligated airports, which means that they're solely either self-funded or funded with the help of the state, but the FAA isn't a part of that equation. Next slide. Another often unknown area of our aviation system is our backcountry airstrips, which will become a focus of this panel. So the backcountry airstrips in Utah, there are 268 of them. 69 are actively used to varying extents, and there are 199 that are either inactive or unverified. But we know they're there, and we can demonstrate a historical precedent of use. We're just unsure of the existing conditions. Next slide. So with that brief introduction, we can talk about the aviation development strategy. So what we did here is we took 3 products, 2 of which are typical products of a state aeronautics division, the economic impact study and a statewide airport system plan. And then we've added on an economic development link study that the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute is running for us. And what we want to do with this is typically these are used by the division and by the FAA to help inform capital improvement decisions. What we wanted to do was make this study as useful to as many organizations as we could. And so we got feedback from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, EDC Utah, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and we all kind of talked about how can we make this study, how can we maximize the utility of this study. And so what we kind of came up with is using the economic impact as a baseline. This is where the economic impact is at right now. This is, how we're performing. The statewide airport system plan is primarily an FAA document that informs capital improvement, but we do have a little bit of flexibility that I'll talk about next in there. And then the economic development links is really what's going to tie all this together. So while the statewide airport system plan will inform what projects we can do and fund inside the fence on the airport property, those are runways, taxiways, and infrastructure type stuff. The economic development links, we hope, will start informing how do we integrate those airports and aviation back into the community fold. So how do we get aviation to work with other modes of transportation and other economic development initiatives? Next slide. And so I want to preface this with that this is all still a draft. The report is not published yet. We're looking for either a January or February publish, but we do got a lot of data that I've just been itching to share. So I'm going to go forward with some of this data, but just be aware that it's in draft format right now. It's not published, and so things are subject to change. Next. So our economic impact. This slide right here just shows the general aviation airport. So it's pretty much everything excluding Salt Lake City International. The economic impact of Salt Lake City International is so huge that it kind of dwarfs everything else. But, that's not to take away, the role that the rest of these airports play. And so the economic impact is, a typical study. We take the total employment, the annual payroll, annual spending, and we get those direct impacts from surveys and interview data. And then we run it through an in-plan model to get the indirect and induced impacts, which gives us the total impacts. And so you can kind of see down there on the bottom right what the total impact for all the airports is. And so we go to the next slide and I'll bring that out for you so it's easier to see. So just a little bit over $1 billion in economic impact. And that's just the airports that are not Salt Lake City International. And so there's a lot of potential here. And this is without, any of this new visioning, without any of the new ideas that we have. This is where we're standing right now. And I will preface this as pre-COVID, but I'll also add on to that general aviation has done really well during COVID. Next slide. Now, talking about the system plan, and the flexibility that we have in that. Actually, my bad. So here's the economic impact of all of them, including Salt Lake City International. So you can see that we had a little bit over $1 billion in economic impact. When we add Salt Lake City International on there, it becomes $12.6 billion in economic impact, and well over 100,000 jobs that are produced through aviation. So those are some pretty significant numbers and something that we want to build on and something that we want to, let people know that, aviation does, provide something positive within your communities that we, and provides a framework that we can build off of. The next slide. So as I talked about, the statewide system plan, it's an FAA document, so there's not a whole lot of flexibility, but where we do have flexibility, we've tried to maximize how we shape that. And the biggest impact there is with airport roles. So most statewide airport system plans, when they talk about airport roles, they strictly keep it to how many operations does the airport have and what existing infrastructure does it have. And that's kind of how the FAA looks at it. And a lot of states kind of just adopt that as how they look at the airport roles. We wanted to expand that, so we can understand how the airport fits within the local economies and the regional economies. And so you can see some of the considerations that we looked at here, proximity to mining districts, oil and gas fields, irrigated farmland, the film industry. We really looked at, a lot of things in here to understand, how airports can contribute to the regional economies. Next slide. And down here at the bottom is really where I want to focus on and kind of steer this conversation. So airports within proximity of tourism and recreation, and airports within or near U.S. bike routes. Go to the next slide. So airports within tourism and recreation. It's hard to see this if you're on a little screen, but what we did is we looked at, what is the proximity of the airport to national parks, to state parks, to water recreation, to ski resorts. And the very last column there is, does it support backcountry flying? which we go back to that slide with the system. You know, those smaller airports or those backcountry airstrips, you know, those have an impact on recreation, and that's what we want to really exploit here. And so, looking at proximity to U.S. bike routes and the corridors there, you can see that there's the corridor there. It's really, this is from the study, and it's not really well definable on there. And you can kind of see where the route is, and you see the airports that they're supposed to support that. If you go to the next slide, I've cleaned that up a bit. So this next slide in green, you see the east-west alignment and the proposed north-south alignment, and Heidi Goodhart's going to get into more details on the U.S. bike route. But this is kind of how this conversation started evolving, and so I think it's important that, you know, we kind of start here, and I'll let Heidi kind of dig into the details here. But, you know, when I first started at UDOT, I think it's right after the east-west alignment got established, and we were talking about, you know, the challenges with finding infrastructure to support the bike route. So, you know, people need places to stay, they need lockers to put their stuff at, they need infrastructure for showers and those kind of things. And, you know, we kind of started having this crazy vision of, you know, this crazy intermodal vision of planes and bikes and how they can support each other. And we have a lot of rural airports out there that, you know, they don't have like a real defined use. And, you know, so is there something with outdoor recreation, with bicycling, with tourism, you know, something additional that we can expand on, you know, and bring together and start creating this intermodal synergy. And so we started looking at, you know, where are the airports along the U.S. bike routes, both the proposed and the already established one. And as you can see here, they are really, you know, really well spaced. I mean, you can ride along this bike route and come across some really good airports here, you know, that have the potential to grow into, you know, this type of role, you know, where, you know, not only is there infrastructure for, you know, aviation to take place safely, but there's also infrastructure to accommodate, you know, recreation users, you know, and so it can become kind of a hub in that sense, you know. But there's one concern that we had down in southeastern Utah, and you can go to the next slide. And that's this area here between Hanksville and Blanding. And so between Hanksville and Blanding, you know, there isn't a lot of infrastructure. There isn't a lot of relief for bicyclists. You know, it's kind of a long stretch there. And so, you know, looking beyond, you know, the traditional airport, I started looking at, you know, where's the backcountry airstrips in this area. And so if you look at the next slide, this shows you where all the backcountry airstrips are along this corridor here. And so just kind of explaining this map here. So the green little airplanes there in the green boxes, those are backcountry airstrips that are actively used. You know, they're flown into, you know, really frequently, you know, by the backcountry flyers. The ones in gold, you know, those would get regular use, but, you know, they don't have as much reporting on them, and, you know, or they might be a little bit more difficult to fly into. And then all the dots on there are unverified. So those are the ones that we know are there. We just don't know, you know, how well the airstrip's been maintained, you know, what condition it's in, you know, but we can demonstrate a precedence of use there. And then we looked at this and we started thinking, you know, how can we expand on this even more? You know, how can we take advantage of this tourism and this recreation industry? And so I went and talked to the Office of Tourism and spoke with Flint Timmons over there. And he says, you know, we're really trying to support our scenic backways, you know, which are different than the scenic byways. The scenic backways are kind of the backcountry roads, you know, of the state. You know, there's a lot of them are unpaved, you know, they're dirt roads. Some of them you need four-wheel drive vehicles to get onto, you know. But how can we start merging, you know, these opportunities, you know, with the outdoor recreation, the scenic backways, the backcountry airstrips, the aviation industry, the airports that are there, and, you know, the U.S. bike routes, you know, and how can we start bringing all this together? And is there an opportunity here to really start developing, you know, new economies and really building upon the outdoor recreation and tourism economy here? And so with that, you know, that's kind of how all this discussion got started. And that's what kind of led me to, you know, to Heidi's office and to Pitt's office. And, you know, I'll let them continue the story.
Great. Let me go ahead and share my presentation. Everyone see this up on the screen?
Yeah, looks good.
Great. So my name is Heidi Goodhart. I manage the Move Utah program, which is a planning program through the Department of Transportation. And we are focused on fostering active, healthy, and connected communities through planning and implementation of initiatives, programs, and projects. So basically, we have an emphasis on improving biking and walking across the state. And we've taken kind of a real catered approach towards all ages and all abilities when it comes to some of our transportation planning. This is an image of a really awesome multi-use trail outside of Bryce Canyon. As you can see, it kind of has this like quality of life image that so many of us are working towards in the state of Utah with our tourism aspects. And again, you know, just for the people that live, work, and play here. You know, just to kind of hone in on some of the economic impacts of active transportation, so biking and walking. In March 2017, a bunch of partners, UDOT, UTA, our local MPOs, our metropolitan planning organizations, got together and funded kind of this economic and health benefits study. And some of the main takeaways from this in 2017, you know, this is a couple years old already, but direct sales and cycling related businesses generated $132 million, which is nearly 2,000 jobs across the state of Utah. And then when you look at bike tourism, that generated $61 million throughout the state, and kind of was tied to 1,500 jobs. And so this means people that are running bike shuttles, people that are doing helicopter drops so that people can, you know, mountain bike in the summer, you know, snowbird running a lot of their trail building initiatives. So these are kind of like all over the state, if that makes sense. And, you know, at UDOT, we're very kind of conscious of the ties that our transportation system can have to economic development. And, you know, we've already had some really large designations when it comes to our US bicycle route system. So this is kind of across the United States, the dark lines are designated corridors and the dashed lines are planned corridors. And so we were the first state west of the Mississippi to actually get across the finish line and designate 450 miles of US bike route across southern Utah. And you can kind of see, this is the segment, so it's USBR 70 and 79. And kind of stemming from that designation, we've been trying to do more planning. So we had like an east-west corridor across the state. Now we wanted to do a north-south corridor to really like provide options for people to come and visit, see the diverse landscapes, basically get out of their cars and travel across the state in a way that's kind of unique. Bicycle tourism is kind of this unique way of experiencing the landscape, right? You're on your bike, you're physically moving through space, you smell the sagebrush, you feel the wind. It's kind of a growing aspect for people to have a different kind of vacation, right? Allows you to unplug, de-stress, get physically you know, like engaged in getting from point A to point B. And we really have some unique corridors across the state, really robust trail systems that support some of, you know, our visions for building out this network. And, you know, some of our long range plans at UDOT take kind of some of these on-road facilities that we're designating, and over time and over the course of, you know, the coming years and decades, we hope to transition those facilities to trails like this so that they are more all, you know, all ages, all abilities kind of facilities. You know, this is another image from one of our US bike route promotional videos. If you guys have some time, just Google Utah at 15 miles per hour, and it kind of highlights how cool these routes are. You know, in bike packing and bike touring is definitely kind of a growing industry within the state of Utah, and really gives people a unique opportunity to experience our Slick Rock, our Red Rock, our backcountry, Gooseberry Mesa. You know, there's so many really unique riding and hiking situations across the state that, you know, when Clint started talking about his backcountry airports, you know, we had like this really awesome idea of, you know, we have growing active transportation ridership in the state, and tourism is a component of that. And how do we kind of marry the ability for people to get into these really unique places without having to slot out an entire month or an entire week or 2 or 3 weeks to actually ride across the state, when they can kind of on a whim zoom in on an airplane and you know, experience 3 days of a US bike route or a bike corridor in the state of Utah. So right now I'm showing you some Strava Metro data. This is kind of a very like honed in data set that we have at the Utah Department of Transportation. But 2020 is outlined in blue. So if you can follow my cursor, you can kind of see that we've had kind of consistent usership and engagement on the platform over the last several years, so 2017 through 2019. And then with 2020, suddenly we've had this influx of users on the app. So we've had way more engagement with people logging their activities, tracking their rides, those sorts of things. And we're having kind of growing engagement in these younger age groups, as you can see from the blue. Additionally, you know, this is probably is no surprise, we have slightly less visitors to the state of Utah. So you can kind of see that bicycle tourism and people that don't typically ride in the state of Utah really, you know, contributes a lot to this data set and where people are visiting and riding and recreating. And so I think that there's a ton of potential with COVID and people wanting to recreate within the states, because there are some travel restrictions in place, of really fine tuning and honing in safe, efficient travel methods with these backcountry airstrips and getting into really unique recreational opportunities. So this next slide, again, is to just touch on what Clint was saying as far as accessing mountain bike facilities, accessing components of our US bike route. These backcountry airports are really excellently situated to get people from point A to point B quickly without having to drive hours across the state to experience a couple days or a few days or a week of recreating in the state of Utah. So kind of on that note, you know, bicycle tourism is really a growing and continuing to grow kind of aspect of our economy. You know, the numbers that I showed you earlier from our active transportation and health benefits study are a few years old. And I think if you were to go to any bike shop or bicycle business in the state, you will see kind of booming industry. It's, I think, one of the few sectors that are seeing kind of like exponential growth, kind of despite all of the other things that are happening with our economy. So I think that this is kind of a unique thing that we can definitely like help rebuild and help reinvigorate some of our communities that are seeing some economic hardships from COVID. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'll kind of kick it over to Pitt. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Heidi. That's awesome. I can second that. Coming from the Office of Outdoor Recreation, I can second the statement that bicycle industry is blowing up. Basically anything in outdoor recreation that's helping people get away from other people is doing well. So that's ATVs, RVs, camping, biking, you know, paddle boards and boats and canoes and kayaks, all of those things that are helping people to socially distance have been doing really well, and that trend is going to continue to skyrocket. I'm going to share my screen here and talk a little bit about how this kind of affects outdoor recreation specifically, and the potentials that come from that. So our neighbor to the north, Idaho, is actually a shining example of the way that they are integrating outdoor recreation with aeronautics. And so if any of you have been on a river trip up there on the Salmon River drainage, you know, maybe you've spent some time in the Frank Church Wilderness, backpacking or anything like that, you will see backcountry airstrips across Idaho. They have plenty. I think about 150 is what they have. These are active airstrips that are used, you know, and they have a really active user group that's doing it. It's a combination of a few things. It's recreational flyers, so when we think of recreation, a lot of times we think of just hiking, hunting, fishing, whatever, but actually flying your bush plane is a type of recreation for people, and they go out and that's what they use to explore, our public lands and explore these great places. So recreational flying is big. Whitewater is very big there, right? Like I said, a lot of these airstrips are used to fly in outfitter groups and guides and parties to access these multi-day river trips and things like that. Hunting and fishing is another one. In the fall time especially, there's outfitters and pilot services that are getting people to the location where they can hunt and fish. The one interesting one that I think was really kind of fascinating is these breakfast clubs, and there's backcountry lodges, or there's campgrounds, or these airstrips. And what happens is these people put together groups where they fly into an airstrip with their Camp Chef stoves and their coolers and everything else, and they set up this big huge breakfast, and they enjoy each other's company and talk, share pilot stories or whatever they do, and have a breakfast, then fly out in the afternoon and back to where they are. It's just another way to recreate, I guess. And that, I thought was pretty fascinating that's actually a big aspect. There's backcountry lodges that have focus just on that, where they will fly people in for a breakfast and a meal and a little bit of entertainment and fly them out. So how, when we looked at Idaho as an example, I reached out to some folks up in Idaho to kind of get some data and some information on what this does. So I'll talk about this Garden Valley airstrip here in just a minute. First off, I talked to Gem Air, which is one of the bigger operators, aeronautics operators in the kind of rural space up there. So these, they may operate out of Boise Airport, but mostly they're operating out of small airports like Stanley and McCall and Salmon, Idaho, if any of you are familiar with that. And their flying season's pretty short. So when they say they do 350 flights a year into the backcountry airstrips, that's pretty much in a March, April to October, November timeframe. So they're doing a lot of flights into these backcountry airstrips. 400 of these flights, or in addition to that, those are the backcountry kind of really grassroots airstrips. On top of that, they do 400 flights into the small community airstrips. So this is Salmon, Chalice, McCall, Cascade, Stanley, these airstrips that are really supportive of backcountry access. They're the kind of the gateways to a lot of these river trips or backpacking trips or bike trips, as Heidi pointed out, and they do 400 flights a year into these small communities. Again, this doesn't count the Boise Airport, the Sun Valley Airport. These are, that they're actually bringing in commercial flights. These are just small community municipal airports. And it's interesting because they really take advantage of this to an economic standpoint, and to cater it to these flyers and the opportunities that are brought to them. With the 350 flights that are going into backcountry airstrips a year, the smaller community airstrips, the ones I mentioned, are also gaining some economic benefit from this, because they are the fuel supply spot, or the stop, because it is a town, to stop and buy supplies before they go into a backcountry airstrip. All these things that they can take advantage of, and drive a little bit of tax revenue from these people that are visiting. It's interesting also to say that these recreational flyers they're spending multiple days at different airstrips around the state of Idaho, and then they may move on to Oregon or Utah. We know a lot of them stop here in Utah or whatever, but they're kind of skipping across the West to find these, and they map out their own routes and things like that to find these really great adventures for them. And it's interesting to see how they take advantage of that. And I think there's a lot of potential here in Utah to capture more of that group of people that are planning out these routes and want to see more of the country from the air. So let me just show you a little bit kind of the, I need to. There we go. So the Garden Valley Airport. So this is Garden Valley, Idaho. It's a really small community. I think the town of Crouch is right next to it. It's summer homes, cabins. It's on the South Fork of the Payette drainage. But that little airport supports 17 jobs, over $2.5 million in economic output. And this isn't a paved airstrip. This is, you know, I've driven by this a ton of times when I've been up there kayaking or recreating. You know, this is just a grass airstrip right next to a 2-lane highway. And there's always planes there. You know, it hosts smoke jumper training for the U.S. Forest Service. And that's, you know, part of why this is so popular. And then again, just people flying in, whether that's to stay at cabins, summer homes, to get on the river, you know, to access some of these little communities up in the mountains in this drainage. The Stanley Airport, so, you know, this is right in the community. And interesting about this, right, almost $1 million in economic output, 5 jobs. They are actually building right now a bike path from the Stanley Airport to Redfish Lake, which is kind of the, you know, the hub of recreation for the Sawtooth Mountains. You know, there's a little lodge there and a lot of campsites, and the lake's beautiful, and a lot of people use it for access for backpacking and climbing. I was actually just up there a couple weeks ago on a climbing trip in the Redfish Lake area, and it was, you know, interesting to see how many people from Stanley are coming in. There were planes at the Stanley Airport, you know, and they're building a bike path, so now these pilots can fly in, rent an e-bike or rent a bicycle or whatever it is, and head over to Redfish, spend a couple days camping, you know, exploring, whatever, and then back to their planes. So super interesting, you know, kind of how they're mixing this economic development and opportunity into this small community airport. Big Creek Airport, you know, just this is a pure backcountry airport. No roads into this most of the year. I think it was like in August when the snow is off finally and they actually clean the road up, you could drive a really rugged dirt road into here. But Big Creek, really popular. There's a lodge back there, a backcountry lodge, really popular with whitewater kayakers to fly into this one. But again, you know, for just a middle of nowhere airstrip, grass airstrip, it's still producing a decent amount of economic output. And the list goes on and on, so I can show you here. You know, Smiley Creek also in the Sawtooth area. So they all look to each other to support each other, and I think that's the interesting thing, right? I've used some of these airstrips in the past for adventures, and you know, they never question where you're going or what you're doing. You say, hey, I want to get into Big Creek. I want to take 4 kayaks and 4 guys with me, and they're like, yeah, we'll make it happen. And they're really supportive, and it's a really interesting, you know, dynamic with some of these suppliers and some of these businesses that are doing it. There's really good information out there about all these Idaho backcountry airstrips for flyers and for pilots that are looking to, you know, plan their own routes and everything. And Idaho's really embraced this kind of user group, and I think it's helped to expand so much of the access to the different user types and different recreational activities. I know here in Utah that some of our guides and outfitters do use some of our airstrips along the Colorado River, you know, occasionally to get guests in and out, but it's pretty minimal. And so expanding it to where we see these private users and these private planners as well, coming and using this, and then these airports and these airstrips become hubs for recreation is I think a really big potential to make Utah stand out as far as our recreational offering and facilities that we offer. So excited to see what can come of this, and you know, what kind of interest the communities across the state of Utah have in developing this. I will just add one more thing. You know, a couple weeks ago I was in Daggett County in Dutch John. They have a beautifully paved large airstrip that's actually able to take, you know, larger aircrafts in Dutch John. And they said over the 4th of July that, you know, they ran out of places to tie down planes and are just parking them in the grass basically because so many people are flying in to fly fish the green or spend a couple days on Flaming Gorge or, you know, whatever it is. And you know, they thought if only we had a way to kind of capitalize on this, because right now we don't know who's coming in. You know, it's a really basic airstrip. So, you know, they would love to be able to then, you know, have amenities for people to take advantage of right there at the airport, or, you know, camping, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, guide services to be able to be right there to pick up people and run from it. Like I think the potential is definitely there in a lot of these communities across Utah. And, you know, it wouldn't take much to really, again, have a unique offering for all those people coming and visiting our state and seeing it in a new and different way than on the freeway or our highways. So that's all I have. I think next up is Stephanie Pack.
Thanks, Pitt, and thank you to Emily and Clint and the team for inviting us to be here today. We're really excited to participate and to lend a little bit of our voices here. I also wanted to share something with the group. So before we begin, let me just offer up an introduction. I am a business development manager with the Economic Development Corporation of Utah, and I work specifically with companies within the outdoor product industry. So within that industry, it is an industry focus for the state. The state is really committed to building out our outdoor product industry offering. And we work really closely with Pitt and his office to help support the businesses that support outdoor recreation. As a little bit of an overview of who EDC Utah is, we are a private nonprofit and we work hand in glove with the Governor's Office of Economic Development to help recruit companies to come to the state. We also work really closely with our communities and private sector companies here within the state to help support and boost economic development and capital investment here within Utah. We are cheerleaders of Utah, and we help businesses that are looking to invest in the state, businesses that are already here, understand the beauty and the awesome place that Utah is as a place to do business. So my role specifically within outdoor products, we focus heavily on 3 things, and I would love to share some of those things with you. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So EDC Utah, we have created an industry profile for outdoor products, and I just wanted to overview some of the main points that we like to share with businesses that we are hoping to attract to come to the state. The biggest 3 things about the outdoor industry that we like to pitch to the companies that are looking here is first that Utah is already home to a number of huge brands and huge companies that love Utah and have been doing business here for a very long time. So companies like Amer Sports, Black Diamond, Cotopaxi, who started here in the state, Easton, Icon Health and Fitness, Lifetime Products. There's a large variety of outdoor products companies that call Utah home, and they really thrive here. And so, any outdoor company that's looking to the state, we like to tell them you're in good company. Second is we have the most magnificent open space. We have the best testing grounds for any outdoor product companies, no matter what product you produce, what product you're looking to build, guaranteed there's some sort of ecosystem that already exists within the state. Outdoor recreation is such a huge part of Utah's story. It's such a huge part of Utah's culture. It's really natural for companies to gravitate here because this is where their clients recreate. This is where their products are tested. And it's a great place for them to continue to develop new and innovative products. And then third, this is a really unique aspect about Utah is we have 1,000% employment density within the outdoor manufacturing space. That is something that no other state can boast. And it's a really big deal for companies that are looking for experienced talent within outdoor products and outdoor recreation. And so if you are an outdoor products company and you are interested in finding some talent that have experience within industry, Utah is the place to come. This is another interesting factoid. So we are covered in trails and testing grounds for these companies, and they know it, and they gravitate towards these recreation areas. One thing that I think is relevant to this discussion is the importance of our gateway communities. They are a gathering place for people that thrive within outdoor recreation, and they attract the people that leverage these products every day. And it becomes increasingly important for companies to be able to access their customers and companies to be able to access their clientele. And these gateway communities become really important place for these companies to not only market their products, but also find opportunities to test those products. And within those gateway communities, there's a lot of opportunity for these communities to really boast some awesome opportunities for them to be able to recruit these companies and attract these companies to set up shop there, create businesses there, and create capital investment there. So here's just a representation of some of the large employers within this space. And you'll notice there's a wide variety. We have manufacturers within the hook and bullet industry. We have manufacturers within the man-powered pole and paddle sector of outdoor recreation. And that diversity is really important to make sure our industry is robust and viable. And we pride ourselves in having a very rich ecosystem within outdoor recreation, and each of these verticals is really committed to protecting and preserving the outdoor spaces that exist here in the state, as well as everyone else, because it's really important for their business that these recreational opportunities stay viable. And so in regards to the discussion that we have at hand, we are talking about the importance of airport infrastructure. And within EDC Utah, we have an arm called Community Strategy and Outreach. And that arm focuses specifically on helping and supporting our community partners with their economic development efforts. And that includes our community partners within rural Utah and those gateway communities to some of these recreational assets. And so these communities are integral in our story to tell companies about Utah. And we work really hard to help prepare them to be able to tell their own story to these businesses and companies that we are hoping to recruit and attract to the state. One really key factor for them to be able to tell their story is to really have a good grasp on their own infrastructure and their own benefits and their own drawbacks when it comes to their community. It's important for every community to be able to identify a company that is going to be a good fit for their community, that's going to add to their economic diversity and their economic viability. And a big part of that is just understanding what assets exist and understanding the benefits of those assets. And airport infrastructure is a really important infrastructure asset that that communities need to understand in order to continue to develop their economic diversity. And so I would love to turn the time over to Colby Cooley to discuss a little bit about that airport infrastructure and how that can ultimately add to a community's economic viability.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Stephanie. I think really quick introduction. So obviously on Stephanie's team here at EDC Utah, I at one time had the pleasure of covering outdoor products back when my job was fun. No, I still enjoy my job, but anyways, in addition, I currently cover all of our aerospace and defense projects that come in. And then I also run our proactive outreach program. So that's sorry, I've got a little hair going on here. So that's our lead generation effort that we have had stood up since 2014. And it really is pretty simple. Every month we reach out to companies in a given market, and we take a trip when there's not a pandemic ongoing. We take a trip out to a market and meet with anywhere from a couple dozen to up to like 50 or so companies in a given market. And really, I don't like to say pitch, but essentially pitch Utah as an investment location for them. So the cool thing about my job now is that I get to kind of work across industry. I get to talk to companies in outdoor products, in aerospace, in general manufacturing, and food manufacturing, in tech, in financial services, whatever it is. And I think really that's given me the ability to understand, as I've worked with Clint and his team over the last couple of years, really, I guess, huh, Clint? Really just probably the untapped potential that exists around the state for investment opportunities. That really people feel probably a little hamstrung by the ability to get there. We talk to companies that we go literally around the world, and we talk to companies and people that have been to Moab, or have been to Bryce Canyon, or have been to one of our state parks. And if they could figure out a way to get their business there, they would move it, whether they're physically moving goods, and they would love it if there was infrastructure to be able to move stuff in and out by air, or whether they want to set up an office, but they don't know if there's, great broadband activity or whatever. There's so much interest in Utah, and interest in Utah off of the Wasatch Front. And so I think what Clint's team is doing in partnership with GoEd, and in partnership with the Office of Outdoor Rec, is really pretty powerful, because, we know that a lot of the prosperity that Utah has enjoyed over the last decade or so really has not always gone out to these shoulder communities or out to these rural communities. And aviation infrastructure and the ability to show people who are not from Utah, maybe don't know exactly what exists here, the ability to show them the incredible quality of life that you can have in Kanab, or that you can have in even like a I guess slightly larger area like Richfield or whatever, and have access to recreation, world-class recreation, while still being able to run a tech company, a small tech company out of their house, or out of a small office in those communities, or the ability to put a small warehouse. If you're a company that you don't need a ton of space, you just want to move a little bit of goods here and there by air or whatever it is, there's opportunity here, and it's untapped, and we can spread some of that prosperity out again off the Wasatch Front. And so I think, again, I cannot commend Clint's team enough around helping put together a manifest of what exists out there, and helping communities also understand what exists right in their backyard and what's possible. And I think looking at Idaho, looking at all these other states and communities that do this well, we've got a lot of ground that we can make up on, but I think we've got the best territory in the world to introduce people to, and to invite people to come do business in. So I won't ramble on too much longer, but I appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel today as well.
Great. Thanks everyone for sharing your presentations with us. We do have a video to kind of drive home the point. Heidi, if you want to talk a little more about it.
Yeah, so I make a little bit of a cameo in this video. We could talk all day about, oh, you could use these airplanes to like fly into rural Utah. And Emily's done a ton of videography work and editing to kind of pull together some imagery to really kind of like visually represent how getting there is most of the fun, and how these airports can really have some unique appeal with seeing and recreating in the state of Utah. So go ahead and play the video, Emily.
And just in case anyone has some issues with the audio, I'll put the link in the chat.
Awesome. Awesome, Emily. Thanks so much.
No problem. Okay, we'll go into our moderated discussion. And I'll just go through and ask the questions that I have, but if anyone in the audience has questions they'd like to ask, you can throw it in the chat box and we'll kind of pick it up as we go. Okay, so this one is more of a planning related question. But how can we strengthen existing corridors to support all the changes that you talked about?
Yeah, I'll start off on that. So, a lot of this, one of the things I've tried to help people understand, the asset they have, with their airports and with aviation, is that, all airports are intermodal, just by the nature of them, right? Nobody, walks out there, well, few people walk out their front door, and then get into a plane and head off to wherever their destination is. You got to get, somewhere on, some kind of surface mode has to take you to the airport. And so, typically when I went and talked previously to people and I start talking about airports and start talking about aviation, I start getting that glossed over look because this isn't their, it's not their wheelhouse. They're not used to dealing with aviation. And so they got people like me and the people in my office that take care of that, but while we can do things really well on the inside of the fence, we can maintain the runways and the taxiways and make sure all the infrastructure is there to accommodate safe flights. Getting people there, is one of the most overlooked and critical pieces. And so reframing airports, not just as aviation facilities, but as intermodal facilities, really kind of takes it to the next level here. And when we look at it that way, we're not really reinventing the wheel on this. I mean, we have models to site and develop freight intermodal facilities. We have models to develop and site transit intermodal facilities, and then various things. And so what we're looking at here is with like recreation intermodal facilities, we have lessons that we can take from, the work that others have done to really develop that. And so looking at existing tools that we have, UDOT has its corridor planning initiatives. The Wasatch Front Regional Council has TLC, the Transportation Land Use programs, to provide funding for that. The Office of Outdoor Recreation has grants, that I've talked to some of them and they're open to looking at, seeing aviation and, links between aviation and recreation, in some of those grant applications. And so, really starting to think outside the box on what, what your airport can do, not just as an aviation facility, but as a hub for connectivity and as a hub for employment and jobs, really starting to expand, the airport as an intermodal facility and the airport as a intermodal land use. How can we start looking at it differently to start seeing, the value in the surface connections and the intermodality there. And I don't know if you have any other insight on that, Heidi.
Yeah, so improving some of our roadway corridors so that there is, like really great multimodal accessibility to these airports, right? Like, so, Pet was talking about a trail connection from Stanley to Redfish Lake and the airport to really help with that permeability and give people more options than just hopping in their car to get from point A to point B. A lot of work that we're doing with our US bike route designated corridors, kind of knowing that we will have bikes there, that there's going to be increased bicycle traffic, and we have to kind of balance the needs of both users with, roadway, freight, and, people on bikes and walking. We definitely have people that walk across the country or run across the country. That's a thing also. But we've been able to prioritize some of our HSIP, so our Highway Safety Improvement Plan dollars, our program dollars, to widen the shoulders, kind of as we're doing a roadway project or a resurfacing project, we can see the safety benefit that even having an extra foot or 2 feet or 3 feet of asphalt on the side of the roadway can help those users have a safe place to ride without really having to impede on vehicle traffic. And so, some of the improvements that we can be making incrementally over time are signage based, so route finding with our US bike route signs so that you know that you're on the corridor. And then additionally, having kind of our normal bike placard signs that advise motorists to pass with 3 feet to really improve some of the safety conditions out there. And then, like I mentioned in my presentation earlier, transitioning over time these corridors where the context makes sense into multi-use trail systems so that they can be usable by, you know, a more degree of the public, if that makes sense. Oftentimes you don't want an 8-year-old on the shoulder of the road biking behind you, but with trails, suddenly those opportunities for recreation are much, much wider for a wider variety of users. So.
Great. And if you want to go into a little bit more detail about like the users and why, you know, planning for this would be critical.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about like the active transportation users, and if Clint wants to talk about aeronautic users, he can jump back in, or airplane users rather. So, you know, we have quite a few people. Surprisingly, I get calls, you know, in the summer, like on a weekly basis. In the winter, it's more people that are planning and trying to like program out like their summer vacations or their summer trips. There's quite a few people that call to figure out routes where they can and can't ride, what areas of the state they can get to, you know, like, is this actually a state road? Is it gravel? What's going on here? Can I go out to the Dugway Proving Grounds? You know, like there's a number of questions from all sorts of people. I've had people in the United Kingdom call me about flying in with their bike and, you know, are there facilities at the airport to assemble their bicycles when they arrive? You know, those sorts of questions. And it kind of sounds a little wacky, but like, you know, I think that we're going to start seeing an increase in bicycle tourism. Delta just announced that you can check your bike just like you would check any luggage last, I think, summer. And that makes a huge difference. It used to cost around $250 on each leg of your trip to check your bicycle, and it had to be in a specialized bag. And now you can basically just take your mountain bike with you for the price of a checked bag. And so I think that we're going to start seeing people really taking their gear with them, wanting to really have unique opportunities and or buy gear while they're on a trip and then take it back. So, you know, I think the user base is definitely kind of expanding, even off-road. Mountain biking is a growing component of Utah tourism, and all of the gear associated with that, whether it's downhill mountain biking or cross-country mountain biking, gravel, road biking is a really growing demographic in the state. And, you know, even though, you know, we're kind of focused with state facilities and pavement and bike lanes and shoulder space, you know, we're kind of seeing this growing demographic, not just from kind of your mammal riders, your middle-aged men and lycra, but kind of expanding into all sorts of ages. E-bikes are really bridging the gap and allowing older adults that kind of have some sort of physical restriction to get out and actually cover miles on their bikes. So we're definitely seeing a growing user base in the bicycling world.
Yeah, and on the aviation side, so you got, you know, two main groups of users. One is the actual aviator, so the pilots, and so you know, Pitt talked about the backcountry pilots. It's the only rapidly growing segment of aviation, of general aviation, is the backcountry flying segment, and that's enabled, you know, by getting a, you know, they have different classes of pilot's license that you can get. So you got the full-on private pilot license, you know, which is expensive, and, you know, there's a lot of hours of flying. You know, but you can take a couple of steps down from that for a light sport license and get, you know, a pilot's license with some restrictions on, you know, safety and you know, what you can do. But, you know, you can get that in about half the time. And so that's enabling a lot of these pilots to, you know, go in with shared ownership on aircraft. And, you know, like, you know, when I talk about, you know, my pending, you know, inevitable midlife crisis, you know, I don't want to be a Harley guy. I don't want to be a Corvette guy. You know, I want to be a guy with a bush plane. You know, I want to go out there with these guys that are backpacking via plane and go and visit some of these places and see some of these places. You know, so that's kind of the aviator side of the house. On the tourism side of the house, so talking with the Office of Tourism, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, and Heidi mentioned, you know, people calling from the United Kingdom, you know, so there's people all over the world that know of Utah and know of what, you know, what Utah has to offer. You know, and, you know, they've gotten here and gotten a taste of it, you know, with Moab or with Zion, and, you know, they want more, you know, and so they start asking questions of what am I missing? You know, what do the locals go to? You know, what are the other places in Utah that I can see that not everybody's getting to see, and how can I get there? and so these people generally, when they get into a town via a plane, and get a ride out into the town, they're spending quite a bit of money. And so looking at the economic impact of the worldly traveler, is pretty significant, and then, just the guys that are flying cross country, they're stopped for gas, at a small rural Utah airport. How do we get them to consider leaving the airport? So a lot of them are getting gas, spending 45 minutes on the airport. If we can get them, compel them to get off the airport and out into the town to get, that really awesome burger at the small cafe, if we can get them, downtown for some, some other kind of recreation or even just entertainment activity, that's economic impact going in there. We have visitors at these airports that are stopping for gas and leaving and never take a step off the airport property. So how do we get those people off the property and contributing to the economy, in more ways than just buying aviation fuel, so there's a lot of opportunity out there for that. Time is flying.
Yeah, definitely. I still don't see any questions or comments from the audience, so I'll continue asking questions. This one is for Pitt, and it kind of goes into what Heidi was talking about earlier with cost, but if it were cheaper to fly, could you see more people traveling to rural Utah for recreation and tourism?
Yeah, definitely. So I would turn around that question to all of you and say, what's the most valuable thing in your life right now? And for me, it's time, right? It's I would love to be down in mountain biking in Moab this weekend, but could I get down there, ride my bike, and get back by my Monday morning meeting or something? That's hard when you're adding 5 hours of driving each way there. With a flight that's an hour or 2 hours, and if it was comparable in price and affordable, like obviously it's kind of a no-brainer. So if it was cheaper to fly, I think you would see a lot more people taking advantage of that. And on top of that as well, I think it's all about the experience, right? So flying is a fun experience, and flying adds to the whole adventure of it. So anytime I have used a backcountry airstrip, or I've flown into lakes for fishing or something like that, the best part, I consider that adventure doesn't start when I land on that lake. The adventure starts when I'm getting on the plane for to take off, and that's just part of the experience. Coming from the outdoor industry as well, and working, where we spend a lot of time and a lot of money to bring people to our headquarters or to a location to do a media trip, to do testing of products, whatever it is. And the worry was always like, all right, how do we get them off the plane and get them engaged as quickly as possible? Even though we'd want to take them to great places in Utah, we always backed away from it because fly to Salt Lake, and then we'll put them in a van for 6 hours, and that kind of kills the experience for media, and it makes it difficult. And again, time is a major issue. So, being able to fly right into direct locations that, where we could have these amazing experiences for media or whatnot, I think that's a big draw for the outdoor industry. And these, as Stephanie mentioned, all these businesses that are doing their testing and bringing media and bringing potential clients into the state. So, obviously, I think if it was affordable and convenient, I think that is, the convenience and the time factor of it is the real driver here that will get people to start utilizing this. And then just the experience, right? And the feeling of flying is cool, especially in some of these smaller planes and over great landscape and great locations. Like, nobody's going to turn that down. So.
Yeah. And I think, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, the time is, and when we say, if we're going on the bike or hitting the road to go to Moab, and we say our adventure starts when we get in the car and start trying to leave the valley, that's never in a good light. It's daunting, especially if we're going over the point of the mountain during rush hour and stuff. But just to add on to that, the aviation industry, the technology is evolving so rapidly, and the evolution of electric motors is, there's a lot of promise to bring costs down with aviation and making it more accessible to a much wider range of people. And it's a real thing. I'm not just talking about flying cars and drones and stuff like that, but retrofitting, these backcountry aircraft with electric motors, retrofitting the traditional fixed wing aircraft with electric motors, is going to bring a lot of potential, and business to these smaller rural airports and backcountry airstrips. And so I saw a question in the chat about resources. And so a big part of, what we're trying to do here is trying to start putting those resources together. What do you need to plan? And that's really my question to the group out there is, how can we help you plan, for the development of the airport, for the development of the land around the airport, so getting people off the airport, the most common way is a courtesy car. Well, not a lot of places have, or not a lot of small airports have access to a courtesy car, or haven't put a priority on it, or don't see the return on investment, in that. And so helping us, create that justification, that a courtesy car could bring in more economic impact to the airport and make your airport more self-sufficient. Access to a list of opportunities, outdoor recreation opportunities that the airports may have. This is a great idea that, we haven't really done. And so, I've just been given the responsibility of managing our aeronautics website, and this is something I can put on there and distribute to the group. I can start working with the airports and do an inventory of, what do you have to offer around there? How can you get there? Who's there to help you out? What restaurants, are in the area where you can go spend some money at, and we can start creating a hub for that. So, a lot of the questions, we don't have solid answers to, because we're just starting this out. And so it's really great to understand, what do you need? What do the planners need? What do the city managers and the developers, what does everybody need, so we can help work on this together. And so we started this small, basically it was kind of just with me and Heidi, kind of brainstorming with the US bike route, and that kind of expanded out to GoEd and EDC Utah. And, we're getting some momentum here, and it's time to start bringing other people into this fold and start getting some answers here.
Great, thank you. So we are a little over time, but do any of the panelists have any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with the audience? No? Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the panelists for, sharing your knowledge and your energy into this. And thanks to the Utah League of Cities and Towns for hosting this conference. It's been a great experience, and thanks for everyone for showing up.